Welcome to the Beau Show. In past shows, I've applauded Netflix for their variety of programming and content, not the least of which are shows that I enjoy, such as Ozark and Squid Game. In fact, I devoted a whole episode to Squid Game and how it can teach us something about totalitarianism and breakdowns of morality, like we have seen in communism. In fact, I've applauded Netflix for not backing down to the backlash over Dave Chappelle's latest special, about which the transgender community has been apoplectic. And I appreciate Netflix's stance on free speech. So, on a principled level, I applaud that. However, in pursuit of also being simultaneously virtuous, Netflix teamed up with former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who is now a professional activist, and got paid an undisclosed amount from the NFL for what he claims was punishment for kneeling during the national anthem. He thinks it cost him his job, even though he has completed a few tryouts for teams subsequently that have turned him down, not citing his activism or his protest, but just that his athletic ability is not what could help them win. Even though his protests alone caused the NFL to pursue racial justice activism, which you will see all over NFL stadiums with the words "End Racism" on helmets and end zones, the NFL has made that specific activism its top priority, over salute to service, over domestic assault awareness, cancer, whatever cause you name it. So even though Kaepernick isn't playing in the NFL, he got what he wanted: money and power. But that wasn't enough for the guy. He made a disgraceful Netflix series called Colin in Black and White. Now, the title alone implies severe racial tones. That's exactly what he wants. He doesn't care about letting you know that he was a QB who played in the Super Bowl. He wants to rile you up and exacerbate racial tensions. In this series, Kaepernick compares the NFL draft and combine to a slave auction. Actors in this series are depicted on the slave block being sold and weighed, and as Kaepernick puts it, poked and prodded. Let's break this down. On its surface, it seems egregious, and it is. But let me explain why. Slaves had no control over what happened to them. They were indeed bought and sold, in many ways based upon their physical condition, to do hard labor. It's part of history, and while it's really unsavory to talk about, Abraham Lincoln took the weight of the country on his shoulders and abolished it. What Kaepernick intentionally leaves out is that in other nations, especially Africa, slaves were sold and the sellers were not white men. According to the Global Slavery Index, on any given day in 2016, about 9.2 million men, women, and children were living in modern slavery in Africa, both in terms of forced labor and forced marriage. Given the fact that many volatile African countries do not report things like this, that number is likely completely underestimated. So we are talking about modern slavery still going on in Africa. But 150 years later, Colin Kaepernick is comparing the NFL, where players make millions, to the plight of not just American slaves, where it hasn't existed in 150 years, but to modern slaves. This is an inconvenient truth for Kaepernick. Kaepernick, in his opening scene of episode 1, talks about a power dynamic that the NFL creates. Well, yes, a power dynamic is called corporate structure. CEOs, CFOs, VPs, regional managers, and workers. That's in every corporation in the world. It gives the business a chain of command and a hierarchy. But he's comparing that to slavery. And let's look at the reasons that NFL scouts check things like weight, height, arm span, and jumping ability. Oh, maybe could it be because they want the best physical athletes on their teams? Offensive linemen need large arm spans to block. Wide receivers need fast twitch muscles and speed. Quarterbacks need larger hands usually and strong throwing arms. But here's the other inconvenient fact. Every player, regardless of race, goes through the same exact process. White players do not get some sort of pass. The standard is the same. And in this respect, football may be one of the most merit-based systems we have, because teams simply want the best players that can help them win. They generally don't draft a player because he's fun to be around or has a trendy identity, or in Colin's case, hairstyle. They pick the best physical specimen. And no one is forcing them to play the sport. In fact, the teams at that point have to negotiate with the player's agent to come up with compensation. NFL league minimum is $660,000. I'll repeat that, $660,000. Can we call that elite status? This is the group that Joe Biden says he's going to tax hard, so you know they've got money. So of the player's own volition, they agree to be paid over $500,000 at the very least to play 16 games per year, if they stay healthy. Nothing about this process is akin to slavery. That is perhaps the most absurd comparison a person could possibly make. It's not intuitive, it's not clever, it's illogical, and it's profane. The series shows an actor portraying a young Kaepernick starting out as a baseball whiz and adopted by white parents, saying he assumed that their privilege was his own.
Growing up with white parents, I assumed their privilege was mine. You too good?
Okay.
Fine, thanks. Yeah, I'm good too. Thanks. I was in for a rude awakening.
We going ultra black.
What's up with Kaepernick? The hair. Something climbing out the back of his head. Not acceptable.
Notice the look on his parents' faces in that scene. The actors, that is. Does Colin hate his parents? But Colin did make it to the NFL. He did make millions. He was privileged. Kaepernick played 3 sports quite well in high school and got most scholarship offers as a baseball pitcher, but he wanted to play football. And the University of Nevada was the only school to offer him a scholarship. So that's where he went. He is privileged, not just because his parents supported him and his athletic dreams, but also because at that time, he was gifted enough to get a scholarship to college. Sorry, but not everyone gets that chance. So he's leaving a lot of his story out and how his privilege was his athletic ability, in spite of his claims that he has been held back racially all of his life. The Chicago Cubs drafted him in 2009, but he declined so that he could keep playing football. That was another extreme privilege, and he snubbed his nose at it. The 49ers drafted him, and in 2016, when a new coach came in that said that Kaepernick didn't fit their offensive scheme, they released him, and he opted out of his contract and became a free agent in 2017. He tried out for several teams, but nobody wanted to sign him. His girlfriend, Nessa Diab, clearly had a lot of influence on Kaepernick. According to Baltimore Raven legend Ray Lewis, they were about to sign Kaepernick, and then Cap's girlfriend put out a tweet comparing Ray Lewis and Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti to a slave and master. And that killed the deal. Now look, we all know that we do not have total unfettered free speech when it comes to the corporate world. While I love free speech, we all know that we have to maintain a certain standard of basic conduct if we want to succeed in our careers. Kaepernick had been kneeling during the anthem, and he felt that he was being blackballed by the NFL for that political speech. Yet he should have looked at his girlfriend, who sent a blatantly racist tweet to a legendary Baltimore Raven, the very team that was actually going to sign him. Not as a starter, but as a backup QB. In other words, his girlfriend was so demented and racist that she screwed up her boyfriend's career, at least at that moment in time. In subsequent workouts, teams just didn't sign him because they felt they already had the best players on their squads. Can you fault them? This guy had led a life of extreme privilege up to that point. So let's look at the logical fallacy here in Kaepernick's hypocrisy. He still wants to play in the NFL, a league that he has likened to slave owners and slave auctions. When no team signed him, he talked to the XFL, but he demanded $20 million per year. XFL quarterbacks are paid $250,000 per year. So once again, egotistical Kaepernick decides that it's not enough. If he wanted to play that badly, he'd be playing. Players take salary cuts all the time if they truly love the game and they want to win. Colin doesn't want it that badly. He wants to exert his privilege, the very thing he claims he doesn't have. He has a monster deal with Netflix to make this special. He settled with the NFL for an undisclosed amount of money because the NFL was forced into it. Under no circumstances would they ever pay a player off for being substandard. That's why players get cut from teams. He thinks it's because he knelt during the anthem. And in some ways, I can see why teams might be a little reluctant, but if the dude can help the team win a Super Bowl, they'll take anybody. Trust me, look at the past at the Oakland Raiders and even current domestic abusers who still play in the league. They overlook a lot of shortcomings to win. Aaron Hernandez, a former New England Patriot tight end, murdered someone. But what is so interesting and ironic about Kaepernick's mission to make a point about racism and specifically police brutality is that statistics are not on his side. Chicago is experiencing its highest number of homicides in a quarter century. Most of those are of young black men by young black men. They are not at the hands of white police officers, which is what he wants you to think. If he cared, and I mean really wanted to make a difference, he'd be in Chicago trying to do something in the western and the southern suburbs, where maybe he could use his influence to influence a kid to pursue his natural athletic ability rather than guns and gangs and drugs. Instead, he's indoctrinating anyone who follows him or watches his Netflix series to make you think that the NFL is run like a slave plantation. That couldn't be more incorrect. And it's not just false, but it's false with intent. The NFL experienced an 8% decline in viewership after his antics. So he didn't just cost the NFL some money for his settlement, but he cost the league some fans because he made football an activist sport, but not in a good way. When Nike released a shoe with the Betsy Ross flag for Independence Day, Kaepernick called it offensive, and Nike pulled it. See, I think Kaepernick was the tinderbox for all of this woke nonsense. It is hacktivism, and I emphasize the word hack. That has made racial tensions much worse, but more importantly, has spoken simple untruths. And he's doing it again with this Netflix series. Kaepernick supports the abolition of police and prisons. He believes that prison reform is just reinforcing systemic racism. So Colin wants all police and all prisons obliterated. Can you imagine that? I mean, honestly, crime is off the charts right now because there is little repercussion for crime. Chicago's police chief said that just this week. Imagine if there are no police and no prisons. It would be utter anarchy. And Netflix wants to be in business with this guy. Nike pulled a new shoe over Colin's dissatisfaction, but yet he wants to play in the very slave-themed league that he claims is so bad, and he won't take any less than $20 million per year. That shows you where his heart truly is. He's obeying money. He's worshiping it. And he's using this profit to warp Americans, especially young Americans' sense of what this country is about and what problems we actually have. He's not encouraging them to go to school and become the best athletes that they can be so that they can go to a school like Nevada on a scholarship, especially for those who can't even afford college. He's encouraging them to become paid, trained activists who hate America. Former NFL player Jack Brewer weighed in on this.
And when you have someone like this who has the audacity to call multi-millionaires slaves and compare a process of someone living their dream, going to the National Football League, comparing that to slavery, it's gone overboard. And I think Colin Kaepernick needs to do some soul searching. Yeah. You just watch that video. You see how dark it is. And to take the most fragmented, the most vulnerable population we have in America, where we have kids that 70% of them don't have fathers. A lot of them can't. Their reading and math proficiency levels rate against third world countries. You have kids that are already hopeless, and then you go out and push this mentality, and you're supposed to be someone that's a leader. Think about the movement that this guy started, the opportunity that he has, that he could actually come in and promote positivity to young black and African American men, telling them how great this country is. He doesn't have that spirit in him.
I think Jack Brewer's right. It's a major missed opportunity. But not just a missed opportunity, it's almost demonic propaganda. It's sordid. It brings out the worst in people. It teaches kids the wrong ideas. Nowhere else in the world can you use your genetic athletic blessings coupled with hard work and determination to become a multi-millionaire in the sport of football, regardless of your race, your religion, or your politics. You cannot do that anywhere else in the world. And you will be paid handsomely for it if you are good. Like I said, this is largely a meritocracy. You don't get to the top due to your skin color or diversity. You get to the top because you play well. That's why owners want to know how fast you run and what your ball catching ability is. They need to know that. They are paying you well so that they can win too. And even the camaraderie that comes with playing sports that could be so helpful to kids, especially crossing racial lines. That's where Colin could be making a difference. But he has chosen a different path. He acts as though only black players are treated like the slave auction. He was raised by white parents who adopted him. That's winning the lottery for a lot of kids. That's privilege. But he wants you to think that the only privilege out there is being born white. So his premise is all wrong. I don't know if his girlfriend is the one responsible for warping his mind and brainwashing him, but she was clearly responsible for one major missed career opportunity. I don't believe that Kaepernick's activism has come through the result of personal maturity or evolution. Things like this almost have to be taught. Many times I think that people don't actually believe the things that they are saying because they've already put blinders on. And when I think about the movement this guy has created, from revoked Nike shoes to emblems on helmets to Coca-Cola creating employee training to become less white, you realize how insidious and infectious such a philosophy can actually become. People have practically bent over backwards for this guy, yet it's never enough. He's not Rosa Parks, he's not Jackie Robinson or Jesse Owens. As much natural ability as he has or used to have, he's not good enough to play in the NFL. For all we know, he could be a pitcher in Major League Baseball right now. But apparently he thinks he's too good for it. And when it comes to activism and having the passion to pursue a just cause, you have to have some humility about you. This is not Martin Luther King. What did Kaepernick lose? He was paid off by the NFL. He's paid by Nike, paid by Netflix. Now he's got a publishing arm too. The guy goes out there and says, we need to get rid of police and prisons, and he's applauded. Is that not insane? This is the role model of the 21st century. This is who we want kids looking up to. I mean, look at Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald. Not only an incredible athlete, but he started the Larry Fitzgerald First Down Fund, which helps kids and their families create positive activities in the summer and throughout the year. He's giving access to technology and laptops and computers and sports so that kids have something to do rather than going down the bad slope of crime and drugs. He's received accolades for his philanthropy, but does he have a deal with Netflix? Nope. Whom do you want your kid looking up to? Larry Fitzgerald or Colin Kaepernick? The two couldn't be more different. I watch how players are on the field and off the field. And sadly, I think that in the wake of the Kaepernick controversy, the league caved. The protest made it less fun to watch. Now people who protest will tell you that protest is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. But the thing is, protests can also have a responsive reaction that isn't so good. Outside of Kaepernick, the George Floyd death sparked a series of protests, many of which took the form of riots, which involved violence, arson, and looting. In this Netflix series, Kaepernick's parents are played by Nick Offerman, a comedian, and Mary Louise Parker, and they play them like the stiffest, squarest, white bread fools you could possibly stereotype. In another scene, two medical workers are talking about spying from the Patriot Act and creating the awful Department of Homeland Security. It is subliminal, but it's entirely intentional. When discussing NBA player Allen Iverson, they even insert Trump's voice saying the word thugs to refer to Iverson, which actually never happened. He takes repeated political shots at Trump. So Kaepernick and director Ava DuVernay are painting a narrative that doesn't exist, but it has intentionality to it. Square white parents, mortified at black culture, terrible Patriot Act and the DHS, NFL slave auctions and power dynamics. The series is well made, I'll give them that, but in attempting to be an autobiography, it shows both a disdain for all things white and narrative fallacies coming from a person who wants to be a rebel. Not once in the first episode does young Colin show any gratitude for his parents. even when his mom attempts to get his hair braided for him. It shows his parents as awful people who liken him to a thug. It depicts black neighborhoods where everything is just wonderful. Kids are doing somersaults and cartwheels. Doesn't show Chicago or Compton then or today. It's a fantasy. This is how Colin sees the world, not how it actually is. It can be said that on the football field, or in just about any field for that matter, there's true equality in colorblindness. Everyone has to play their part to win. But in Colin's world, it's all a black struggle against white approval. He probably thinks it's why he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL right now, even though Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Teddy Bridgewater, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Trey Lance, and many others are all current black starting quarterbacks. They did it their way, and they had the athletic prowess to be named starters. Kaepernick has taken his rejection as a dethroned quarterback and warped this rejection into interpreting it as a white man's slave system, built intentionally to keep another race down. 69% of the NFL is black, which means that there are more black millionaires in the NFL than just about any other profession. Does that sound like systemic racism to you? Kaepernick has a warped sense of America and an unfortunate sense of himself when he is richer and more privileged than most of us. The lecture is getting old. Colin in black and white is just more anti-American racially distorted propaganda. I'm Beau, and that's the show.